So for those who are not familiar with i4Kids Europe, it's an initiative that comes from a lack of European focus on pediatric innovation, where we see that health innovation was still focused on adults, being that, for example, medical devices need to be adapted from an adult to a children. We also saw that there was a real fragmentation of the ecosystem in Europe between leader innovators countries and emerging countries that are a bit later in this stage of innovation. And that's why we created i4Kids Europe 2 years ago. That comes from i4Kids, which is a Spanish initiative. And this European Pediatric Innovation Network has a goal to create synergy between strong and emerging innovator ecosystem, but also to strengthen the innovation competitiveness of the European pediatric sector by accelerating solution to the market for children's and maternal solution. So just to give you an idea, some outcomes that we had recently was the Pediatric Innovation Day 2024 in Riga in September, where we bring together all the pediatric ecosystem in Europe. That was a great success for those who participate. And we also have currently this training capsule. So we are at the end of them, but you can find all of them in the channel i4Kids Europe in YouTube with all the recordings. So we will send that to the chat. But without saying more, today it's David Cole that will be the moderator of this amazing panel of investors in pediatrics. So first of all, thank you a lot, David, for bringing all of them together and looking forward to see these great perspectives that they will bring. So David, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Charlotte. I'm just going to try and get the technology to work to share my screen. I think you may need to stop sharing, sorry.
Okay.
Can everyone see that?
Yes, we see a small screen. Perfect.
Okay. Perfect. Well, so first of all, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to join you. Unfortunately, now I've done that, I can't see anybody. I will try and close this down as quickly as I can. But I've just got a couple of slides to start. But maybe before we do that, I'm really delighted that we've been welcomed, or we've got 3 fantastic panel members to join us, all of which are operating in children's health, or operating at the forefront of funding within children's health and promoting the opportunity that Charlotte has just described. So I will, just because I want to get rid of these slides as quickly as possible, I'm going to come to those introductions very shortly. So bear with me. Always good when the technology works. So just to kind of set more of a scene, probably we're preaching to the converted here because everyone knows this, but the reason why we are so passionate and why this is such an important topic is because children do represent 25% of the population. But unfortunately, when it comes to funding, certainly from a healthcare perspective, they receive way below what we should. So less than 5% of global health funding goes to children, and less than 1% of digital health funding goes to pediatric care as well. And we, I think, are probably in the growing minority, I'm pleased to say, but less than 1.5% of that actually comes in via venture capital. And I think what we're hoping to do today is to show you that we're trying to change that landscape, as I said. Now, one of the things that was the catalyst for this Capsule was a recent report that Charlotte and her team put together, a situation report around the state of European pediatric innovation. The report is available online, easy to download. I have read it cover to cover. It makes perfect sense in terms of the industry view that I have, and I'm sure that my fellow panelists have as well. There was a lot of situational analysis that went into it, and of course, one of the key outcomes was that there was a lot of financial barriers that were seen between different stakeholders. Now, depending on where you were in the European region, there were different outcomes in terms of what was seen as a barrier to innovation. We will all, I think, agree that regulatory side of things were really important, but also difficult to navigate in some respects. And as you see in other aspects, the kind of infrastructure, bringing in the right people in terms of the human capital, that was equally a problem area. But one of the major areas, second, when it came to actually the opinion of the ecosystem that was reviewed, was the financial barriers. And then number one, in terms of what was the most difficult or most important barrier, was the financial side of things. And hopefully what we're going to try and do today is to talk a bit about that, to get the expertise that we have on the panel to talk about what are the opportunities, what does the current landscape look like, and how do we try and navigate that. Again, preaching to the converted, and I'm sure that the panel will touch on this, but some of the myths that have been out there is the market is too small from the pediatric perspective. As we've seen, 25% of that population falls into the pediatric market, but equally, unfortunately, there are more and more life reducing and debilitating illnesses that are coming into childhood now, which we need to solve. Children are our future. The regulatory path is too long and risky, yes, but there are things that are being done to try and solve that, especially in the US from an FDA point of view, and I hope that we'll be seeing more of that in Europe moving forward. Children are not sick. Historically, that has been the case, but as we've seen, again, there are more and more illnesses, sadly, coming about because of a myriad of different things that we probably don't have time to fully go into, but I'm sure that everyone will know what those are. So I don't need to go too far into them. And there are no necessarily good success cases in pediatrics. Well, I think that this panel can probably dispel that myth in terms of the opportunities that are out there. We see, I'm sure collectively, hundreds of different pediatric startups now that are coming into the marketplace, which is fantastic, and everyone is trying to, solve some of very real world problems, very challenging problems, and hopefully that will help to make the market a lot more buoyant moving forward. And what we're going to talk today, as I said, is about where are the opportunities? Where are the opportunities for funding? As we know, money makes the world go round, but we need to understand where those are, or you need to understand where those are, and how you can navigate those. And I've just put here a few of the different areas that we won't be able to go into all of them today, but I'm sure many of you will have heard of these different funding avenues. We will touch on a few of them, and I'm sure if anyone's got any more kind of questions that don't get answered today, then many of us will be happy to talk about those. But please do, as Charlotte said, put your questions into the chat as we move forward, and we'll try and have some good time at the end for Q&A as well. So without further ado, I'm going to ask the panelists one by one just to introduce themselves, if possible. So, Kerstin, would you be happy to kick off, please?
Of course. So my name is Kerstin Papenfuss, and I run the pharma sector here at Deep Science Ventures. We are a venture builder, and I think the main differentiator that's different to how DSV builds ventures in comparison to other venture builders is that we actually start with a problem first, and then try and reverse engineer solutions to actually solve that problem. my background itself is I'm a scientist by training. I have a PhD in immuno-oncology, and since then have worked at the interface of bringing novel medicines to the market, identifying cool projects for small molecule antibodies, but also advanced therapies in the academic setting, and then developing those either into spin-outs or partnerable assets with pharma. And we're really active in the pediatric space because we really fundamentally believe everything that Dave has just said about this being a space for specific opportunities that have the chance to really change the world, right? It makes a much bigger difference if you manage to cure a child of a genetic disease, which I think, have the tools now to do so, than if you extend somebody's life by 2 months at the end of their lifespan.
Thank you, Kerstin. And Marc.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm also a scientist by training. I've been working in biotech most of my career, co-founding companies at the very early stage. Some of them happen to be pediatric biotech companies. And that experience let me engage with an adventure that has been to build this first impact fund in Europe that is fully devoted and only invest into children's health. So today I am the managing partner of this fund, but I like to say I am more an entrepreneur turned into an investor, because I never worked as an investor before this experience. So Montana, we are this fund that we are now starting to invest next year into 16 to 18 startup companies in the next 3-4 years, all of them pediatric.
Brilliant. Thanks, Marc. And I'm sure we'll explore that a little bit more as we go along. And John, please.
Thanks, David, and nice to see some familiar faces here. Thanks for having me back to i4Kids. So John Parker, I'm out of Boston, Massachusetts. And I've been a pediatric-focused investor for most of the last decade. I got into it through a foundation here in Boston that I have been a trustee of for a long time. The foundation focuses on pediatric research, and we moved into the investment space simply to try to increase our impact and get closer to patients. As I built up our program internally, I started to see this amazing deal flow and the pediatric space, where it just seemed like there was nothing going on a decade ago. It's really started to emerge as something still early, but pretty exciting. So I've evolved our foundation's model into a more traditional venture fund with Springhood Ventures. We do primarily seed stage investing, drugs, devices, digital health diagnostics in pediatric or pediatric first companies, and we invest in North America and Europe. So.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. And just to introduce myself, so David Cole, I do a number of kind of portfolio of activities within children's health. My wife and I have run a charity whereby we raise funds to put new technologies into children's hospitals across the UK for the last 10 years. And I also am an advisor to a number of different children's hospitals in the NHS, Alder Hey, Sheffield being 2 of them. I lead from a commercial perspective, so help them to understand how best to work with other organizations that are trying to do innovation within children's health. I work and have run a number of accelerators focused on children's health startups, and I also dip my toe into the venture world with John from Springhood perspective. So thank you, everybody, and it's great to have you here. As I said, we're not going to be able to cover everything, but I think what we're trying to do here is just to talk a little bit about the opportunities for funding for pediatric startups, for anyone that's trying to do something from an innovation perspective within children's health. And there are a number of different ways to do that, and the panel members have discussed that already. And I'm going to come to Kerstin first, if I may. So you guys do something a little bit different, Kerstin. You do more of that kind of venture builder type thing. Talk us through a little bit about how that can work and how some of our startups might be able to get involved in the kind of venture building program, as opposed to some of the other things that we'll discuss.
Yeah, so the way we do build ventures here at DSV is by basically spotting societal problems that we would like to have an impact on. And like, it's probably the easiest if I just talk you through an example of one of our current ongoing venture building programs. So we have really got a vested interest in solving pediatric oncology, because I think what we're currently doing, giving to children chemotherapies, might help them for now, but probably ruins them for the rest of their lives in terms of side effects, fertility, and stuff like that. So we really got to do better. And I think in leukemia, we've already shown that, you know, if you harness biology to beat biology, there is a way to actually cure these children. It's just that we haven't unlocked this for solid tumors. So we've been basically asking the question, why isn't anybody doing that yet? And it kind of comes back to some of those market constraints that you mentioned in your presentation, David. People perceiving this to be a small market opportunity. And we're like, yeah, if you look at pediatric cancer individually, the individual indications might not be big. But what if you try to, and really ambitiously, so we ask a lot of first principles questions during our process. What if you ambitiously just ask the question, is there a way that you can cure more than one childhood cancer by looking at them as a category, right? And then, yes, you might not be able to treat the tumors directly, but kids share an immune system that is fundamentally different for adults. So we've basically said, can we look at the kids' immune system as a kind of opportunity area to build novel technologies and companies that would broadly unlock childhood tumors. And then by being able to cure more than one indication, you are actually talking about a bigger market. And then if you kind of understand these mechanisms, is there also a way to expand into the adult market later on, and just looking at peds cancer as a gateway indication? If you kind of factor all that thinking in from the get-go, then all of a sudden you can combat all these arguments that hold you back, usually fundraising for peds opportunities, saying, oh, it's a small market. No, you have a massive market to play with. Oh, and it's going to be difficult. But no, it's probably not going to be as difficult from a regulatory perspective if there is no standard of care that you might be competing with, right? Some of these childhood tumors, the only thing that you can do, for example, in osteosarcoma is amputation, right? That's what you're competing with. It's that dire. So that then makes the clinical pathway a lot more straightforward and easier to navigate. And then all of a sudden, people see this as a way to speed up their drug to get into the market, rather than seeing this as an impediment. So all these thoughts is what we put into thinking about what we call an opportunity space before we actually start venture building. And then once we have an understanding of what needs to happen from a kind of market perspective to build a venture that can actually raise money, then we try and develop technologies that fit these constraints, really. And once you have that, then that lets you tap into a lot of different funding pots. I mean, in the UK, it's really, really good for these things at the moment. So there's a real emphasis on pediatric cancer, for example. I mean, LifeArc and Cancer Research Horizon have just announced their See Further Alliance. Innovate UK has made pediatric cancer one of their focus areas. And by showing that you have something that actually has a clear path to the market, we've been able to tap into quite a lot of these funding sources already.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kerstin. I think we'll come back to some of those examples that you gave. But I think that the thing that always interests me, and I think is a really great structure that you're doing with the Venture Builder program, is that you're not allowing startups or founders to go off on their own. You're putting a team around them. You're bringing that infrastructure to allow them to, you know, more the merrier kind of thing, and trying to do these things together, bring expertise in, rather than doing it on your own. John, I'm going to come to you, because one of the things that I always enjoy your perspective on is that continuum of funding. And I know you've seen it from both the kind of very early stage family office all the way through the kind of gears to exit, as it were. So can you talk to us a little bit about how that might work? So when as a founder, what are the potential opportunities that one might have to start seeing funding?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. This is something we think about a good bit. So I think the critical element is for a stage of a company, and I really appreciate how Kerstin was thinking about it, where they're really going in very early, and you have to think about financing very differently in that situation as to opposed to, once you're, in clinic and trying to raise money, for a phase 2 study, you're thinking about money very differently. And in my world, where I'm going out and talking to companies that are doing it more on their own, it's a pretty long journey, and it's going to start in academia usually for most of these opportunities, where it's going to require grant money from either advocacy groups, government groups, whatever. And one of the things I like about pediatrics is that money does tend to be, everybody always wants more, but there's a decent amount of money there to really advance some great technologies. And when it's early, you need to go after that kind of money, because it's really hard for an investor to write a check when it's still just an idea and you don't even have animal data, or if it's on the device or digital side, if you are still a long ways from regulatory approval or any revenue, you want to find all those other sources. As you get through that and use some of that money to show some evidence that it works, that you've got some prototypes, you've got something you can really show to investors, you can start to approach different kinds of funders, and there are lots of them. We've talked about some small market issues, and I think that is true with pediatrics, but lots of other things in healthcare in the world too. If you've got a company if you've got a relatively small, say, medical device, or if you're going with just a therapeutic and it is a fairly small market, you don't want to go off and try to pitch to the billion-dollar venture fund on day one. It just is not something that they'll understand, that they'll like. It doesn't, as we say, move the needle for them. So you want to try to find, whether it's a family office and a high net worth individual, a foundation, early on, who the kinds of the size of checks they write matches up with where you are, and their risk profile matches up. So for me, I'm lucky I get to invest out of 2 buckets. I've got a family foundation. We invest out of that. We'll often be first check in. We only do a couple of investments a year, so we can't help everybody, but we will take some risk on board. We still want to see a good pathway to success, and that includes financial success, but we'll write smaller checks. And so when a company is looking to raise that first 500 or 1,000 or $1 million, we can be a good person, a good group to talk to, because we're comfortable with that risk. We can think long term, and we're patient. We try to help companies in their journey. For my venture fund, it's a little different. I'm looking a little bit later. So if it's a therapeutic, I want the funding that I'm providing at that stage. The company should be using that money to get into clinical or advancing clinical work. I'm past preclinical work at that point. If it's a device or a digital company, well, I want to see some commercial traction at this point on that stuff. So I can still do with small companies, because I'm not managing $1 billion, not yet. We'll get there. But right now, I'm really happy to look at a deal where the company will only ever raise $5 million, and they may have a $100 million exit. I don't need a unicorn. That's fantastic. A lot of investors can't do that. So I will think about this sort of all the way through, and that's my perspective. But I also, sort of to your point, David, will always think about the entire journey in front of wherever a company is. So if I'm going to come in the seed round, maybe participate in an A round, it's really important for me to understand, is this company going to need a B and a C and a D round? If so, I start to get very nervous. If I think there's a really interesting path and a high potential path to exit after the A round, maybe after a B round, but I know exactly where the money's going to come from, because I know what kinds of returns the company can offer. It becomes a much more appealing investment to me. So I'm always thinking about what the finish line looks like. So I think, start to finish, that's sort of that continuum of funding and matching investors and funders with some of those different things. So there's a lot more to go into on that, but I don't want to talk all the time.
Well, I want to come to Marc quickly in a second, but John, just for those that may not know, what's the difference between a seed round and a Z round?
So I use these terms really loosely because there are lots of definitions out there. Look, I think when I operate in the field of sort of the pre-seed and seed, and typically people talk about sort of seed through, let's call it C rounds. And those are sort of seed A, B, C. Those are 4 funding rounds. The seed tends to be when you're, it's higher risk. It tends to be more angels, some families, maybe some smaller funds. And this is really to get the company through to that sort of some level of proof of concept where you can sort of prove everything out and then press the accelerator pretty hard. A round tends to be, and I think about it with, moving into clinical work or early commercialization. B rounds can be for sort of that later clinical work on a therapeutic, or really starting to scale and accelerate revenue growth with some of the other things. But these are very fluid definitions. Mostly what I'm concerned with is less the label, but the deal size and hitting the company being at the right milestones for me. So it's a little bit of I know it when I see it, which is not always helpful to people, but.
Perfect, thank you. Marc, coming to you, one of the things that you mentioned, and obviously your fund has it stamped all over it, but in your introduction is the fact that you are looking at this as an impact fund. Describe to us, if you will, just what the difference between an impact fund is and a more, I'm going to call it traditional venture fund, and what you're looking for when you're thinking about companies that you want to be speaking to or invest in, as opposed to what other organizations might be looking at.
Okay, so in order to answer your question, let me explain that the idea that we define the modality of our fund as an impact fund is a consequence about, I will say, 2 things that they are moving. Okay, so because if things stay as they are currently, the status quo, or as they were maybe a couple of years ago, things are not going to change, and we will keep like this 1% of investment in pediatric innovation and many other stoppers for the innovation to reach the patients in children's health. So in order to make this happen, you need to provoke a change, and there are 2 things that they are changing that as a result of that we can call ourselves an impact fund. The first one is a movement in venture philanthropy. So venture philanthropy is used to say, okay, let's give some money to scientist Gisela, and beautiful Gisela is going to do some research with that, and we'll bring some results, and we don't care about the return of that. We care because we are giving money in a good way, but we are not going to monitor what happens with that results if they really reach the market. And this is changing. Venture philanthropy now is moving from where they were to what is called impact investing, in a way that they are not only interested on giving money for a particular reason, but on what's happening with this investment. And you have a clear example in Save the Children or UNICEF that, you can say that our children lens, centric lens, and they used to just provide funding as in a philanthropic way, and now they are building their own impact funds. Okay, so they are moving in this direction. And the second one, as you mentioned, also is the movement at traditional VCs. So if you think about traditional VCs are super important in health, okay? It's not against traditional VCs, but the way that they are managed and the way that they are structured and regulated makes that focus only on return of investment. So basically, there are many rules around, but one of them, and very clear, is that normally fund managers, they got the bonus, the carry interest, because the performance of the fund in terms of return of investment. So if I give you 100 million and you give me back 300 million, then you get a fantastic carry. If I give you 100 million and then you give me back 100 million, then it's not good. So then means that on the decision making of these traditional VCs, they will always focus on what is performance in a way of return of investment. So if you move that to the single investment point, if you have a technology, a platform technology, who maybe the intentionality of the funders is to develop that for a pediatric indication, and they see that there's a more interesting market opportunity in an adult market in let's say oncology, no? For instance, no? Instead of going to glioma, because you go first to pancreatic cancer, and then maybe then you will go to glioma. So they will always make that turn, no? But this is also moving. So there's the emerging of impact funds, regulated impact funds, where you basically, the fund managers are, the incentive is a combination of economic performance, but as well impact score, meaning that you give me 100 million and I can give you back 300, but if I don't score on the impact performance, I am not going to get the bonus. So then my decision-making change. Okay, so that's why it is important in the case of our fund, Montana, to be an impact fund and be regulated as an impact investing fund. No? So basically, the idea is that you are not only providing a return of investment, because you are providing a return of investment. This is not venture philanthropy, but you are also your performance as a fund manager is also monitored by the impact. So, for instance, in our fund, we have different KPIs. No, instead of quality of life of the children, number of years of the children, reduced mortality in children's health, as our performance as a fund managers is managed by that.
Thank you, Marc. And to me, this is a really key area, and I think it's an area where children's health can put a real kind of barrier between or get a head start between others. Thinking about in the impact side of things. Unfortunately, if you look at the literature, there is not a great deal of reference points talking about the impact, especially from a qualitative perspective around healthcare generally, but certainly around children's health. And so if we can move the needle on that, I think there's a real opportunity to really kind of open up the market, which will be fantastic.
If I may answer, but at the same time, it's difficult because when you spoke with other funds and they are doing an excellent job, it is very difficult to argue that in health, a positive outcome, obviously there's always a positive impact, no? This in any, so you can argue where if you work in healthcare, providing a benefit for the patients, you are always in a, let's call impact, no, framework. But how you measure impact and how you define impact in your regulations is what makes the difference. Not and this is a current argument between the ecosystem and between what is what, and they are people even describing the same way that they were describing EGS washing. There are people talking about impact washing, no? And it's for me it's very interesting because I come more from the biotech life science sector, and I'm quite beginner, no, and they are and I can see the clash between both sectors, so it's quite interesting. Yeah.
Dave, can I add a point on this one?
Please do, please do.
So one of the things, and I think from a founder perspective, that takes some very serious work is understanding when you're thinking about this impact piece, is what impact are different people looking for? And it's very interesting because maybe some people have different views towards returns or not, and you can suss that out. But everybody interested, at least in my experience, everybody interested in investing in children's health does have some other reason than just making money. It's not, they don't do it just because it's the easiest way to make money. Sometimes it's non-impact things like, well, we want diversification, or we do see it's an overlooked opportunity. But usually I find that there is something, people have something like, this is a good thing for us to do. It's part of our culture and values. But they may be trying to solve something around a specific disease. They may be interested in health equity and diversification. They may be interested in health access, which is a slightly different thing. They may be interested in the makeup of the founding team as part of their impact. They may be funding underrepresented founders. So to really understand who you're talking to and what they're trying to achieve is critical. And I have found in this world that you have to really think about with every single investor, because although returns is a commonality among investors, and they may have different levels of what they need, but all of the non-financial stuff, it's different with everybody. So you really have to do your homework and ask people, what are they interested in? And I find myself having to do this all the time, even when I think I know what a group is interested in. I continue to be surprised. So,
yeah, and also I think, and then I will pass the word to Kerstin, because I'm going to finish one thing linking with DSB. The intentionality behind the founders in pediatrics, it's much higher. There's always the percentage of people that is doing that for an additional reason, not just because I love my job. It's much higher. And I have to say, my last job as CEO was in longevity biotech, and when you compare the longevity industry, that is amazing, a great huge opportunity. People claims that they would like to live forever and these type of things. And if you compare that with the message and the resilience of the founders in pediatric innovation, it's something that we need to, how the ecosystem needs to put it into value. And related to that, for me, an interesting opportunity in investment is the role of patients association and how they are also moving. So they are not just a patient association, they want to be involved in building companies. And we have examples at DSB where patients associations are partnering with a venture builder to do that. So yeah, no, Kerstin?
Yeah, we do this a lot. So we work a lot with disease charities and patient associations, because they do fund a lot of basic research in their indications anyway, but they, in the end, want to solve their disease, right? So they understand that this is mostly done through the commercial route. So any more commercial activity that they can be stimulating is a good thing for them. And from a venture building perspective, it does make sense to team up with these patient associations as well, right? Because you get so much value out of it. First of all, you got this super deep subject matter expertise in that indication that you're trying to solve. You get to tap into their KOL networks. I mean, my favorite example was us working with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, where we got to speak to all the 30 key opinion leaders that they usually work with very, very closely, that if I just phoned them up by myself, they would not take my call. But because the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation made the connections, they spend like 2 hours with me answering all my naive questions about, if you could ignore your previous research career, how would you solve cystic fibrosis these days, right? Would you still do what you're doing now? And surprise, surprise, most often the answer was like, no, I would be doing an entirely different route. It's just that nobody is going that way, because everybody is basing what they which was an interesting learning in itself. So you get to tap into those networks of knowledge that these foundations have built. And then you get to tap into the patients as well as the patients as networks as well. You understand what would really make a difference to them in terms of what would shift the needle. Do they need to have a curative therapy, or would it make their life significantly easier if you were just solving this sub-problem first? And could you also turn this into a business? And also oftentimes these patient associations sit on enormous amount of data sets that usually internally they don't have an understanding of what they could possibly do with that, because they don't have the computational capabilities to do anything with that. And they don't even know which questions to ask if they were to hire somebody to do anything with them. So that's what we usually exploit a lot to turn this into value. And that's then value for both parties, right? Because the patient association gets a win that way, because they get a treatment that might solve the requirements for their specific disease that they're looking to solve. And we get a potentially good startup that's already really well connected. And that kind of goes back to that kind of thing that, in my experience, everything works better if you know the players in the networks that you can tap into that, and establishing this yourself is just incredibly difficult and takes just so much time building your own networks, right? So anything that you can do to kind of tap into existing networks to then have people that want to help you or can kind of pass you on to people that might be better placed to help you is so valuable. And that's what we're trying to provide for founders that work with us. They can kind of borrow our networks that we have built over the last like 10 years or so. So
Kerstin, one of the things between this conversation that I wanted to point out, but then come back to you on is, firstly, one of the pieces of advice that I think hopefully everyone would agree with is that health economics is done really badly generally within healthcare generally, but children's health specifically. We need to have better health economics around what are you trying to solve, which will then get Marc really excited, which will then get John really excited, which will then get Kerstin really excited, right? You come to any of us with that, and we will want to see it. That's my number one piece of advice for everybody moving forward. The second thing is that what we've been talking about just in the last few minutes has really been about organizations that have kind of established themselves. They've got something to go on. They know where they're going, and they're looking for follow-on funding. Kerstin, one of the things you started talking about at the beginning was that there are other opportunities for funding, especially non-dilutive opportunities right at the beginning, where we can prove that there is an impact worth going after, or we can prove that there's something to be having a conversation with the VC about. I know that there are really good opportunities in the UK. Maybe John and Marc can come in a minute and just talk to us about what the opportunities are outside of the UK. But Kerstin, talk to us a little bit about where would you go for these kind of non-dilutive opportunities?
Well, it really depends on your setup, right? But I would look at all the possible angles that I could be exploiting, right? So you can thematically exploit what you're wanting to do. If I have a cancer research startup, then I would look at all the relevant cancer charities that might have grant calls out that might fit what I want to do. But that's the obvious thing. If I'm a female founding team, then there's a lot of funding out there that is specifically tailored to help women businesses develop, right? And a lot of that is non-dilutive. Are you working in an exciting technology area where you could make headway on certain manufacturing questions? There's lots of like manufacturing grant funding out there. So really look at all the areas of innovation in your product, and also at different compositions within your team or anything special that might let you tap into special funding pots that otherwise you wouldn't be able to tap into, I think.
Perfect. And one of the things I think of when I go for grant funding applications is having the ability, especially in children's health, to work with patient populations and family populations to do that user-centered design testing, to do that other testing is absolutely crucial. They will look for that. They will want that as part of that grant application. John, from your experience, what have you seen here?
Yeah, so we're lucky. We have a very robust government program to support startups, the SBIR program. So, and there are I see a lot of non-US companies. I'm not sure of all the exact the specific rules, but we're being able to tap into the US funds. But some of those programs, it doesn't really matter where you are in the world. Some of them you do need to be in the US. But there's everything from NIH, these SBIR loans to, I've started to see some really interesting things happen with the new ARPA-H program. And some of those grants are extremely large. There's no rhyme or reason as to how they make them, as far as I can tell. But if you can find the right program director and get in with them, there's some really interesting money there. As Kerstin, there's a very active patient advocacy community too around specific diseases. I think if you line up with the right disease, which you're not going to do a startup necessarily just to chase the disease that has a lot of money in it, but some pediatric cancer, there's a lot of capital out there. It's fragmented, but there is a lot of capital. Rare disease, it depends on the rare disease. Some rare diseases have really well-funded advocacy groups. Some don't have a nickel. I think when I think about things like an area of great interest is things around prematurity in the NICU. there's not a lot of advocacy money in that space, which is a shame because there's a huge need. It's really it's a perfect area for non-dilutive funding because there are some challenges when you're dealing with neonates. Yet for whatever reason, there's just not a lot of advocacy money there. So you have to sort of go where there is funding. We also have some really interesting things around with on the device side with the Pediatric Device Consortium. They'll work with companies from all over the world. It's not big money, but there's a little money there, and it often gets you in with hospitals, which can be really critical. Another thing that I always encourage companies to look at is some of the regional resources that may be available, and even sometimes moving where your company is to take advantage of certain things. I'll use the cancer example, where for US cancer companies, a lot of them have moved to Texas because Texas has this massive program called CPRIT, which is the Cancer Prevention Research Institute of Texas, which is providing non-dilutive funding to cancer startups based in Texas. And they have about $3 billion, of which a decent amount is earmarked to pediatrics. You do need to set up in Texas if you want that money. So if you're, in the Midwest of the United States, that's probably fairly easy. If you're in France, that may be a bit of a stretch. But understanding where some of those opportunities are, and it's not just the funding things, it's tax things. And never forget the tax advantages you can provide to investors, because that's not grouped in the same way a grant is. Yet, if you can give somebody essentially tax-free gains because of you're setting up in a certain state or country or province or whatever, that may be enough to move angels to provide capital to your company. So there are a lot of layers and a lot of different programs that you can look at there.
Thanks, John. And Marc, I'd like to open it up to the floor, but if you've got a couple of points.
Yeah, well, just to add, obviously in Europe, you have all the European Union programs, the Castelltort, the Eurostars. When you have a pediatric company, normally you have a higher rate of success. That's proven because the need, they understand that there's a huge need for that. There's the European Union is aligned with that. Then there are many new tax benefit structures. One of them in Spain is becoming very popular in pediatrics. It's the one that has been used to finance movies in Spain, and the same structure now is being applied in science. It's called AEIs, and well, you can check on that. And also maybe to add something different, consider as well the I mentioned that at the beginning. Child-centered organizations like Save the Children, UNICEF, they are very interested on the adoption of this innovation that normally is being generated in Europe and in the US, but in many other countries. So they provide catalytic grants, non-dilutive, to make a proof of concept of your technology in an emerging country, and then that's super interesting and also very related with impact. Yeah.
Can I add one word of caution in here too? Just for folks who see money around different initiatives that may or may not fit, be very careful changing what you do just to chase the money. I think can be a really dangerous path. You don't want to chase, especially, again, some of these grants that have a lot of terms attached to them. They're almost more like contracts. If the money's good, if you need it to survive, you go after it, but be very careful not to take on money that just becomes a distraction. Stick to your core business and the right business plan for building your company, and just be wary of some of these alternative sources of funding that they're not going to send you down a path that slows you down or distracts you or any of that.
No, thank you, John. That's a great point, and I think we can all probably give some anecdotal evidence behind that. Just so I can continue to answer questions for hours here, but we've only got a couple of minutes 7 or 8 minutes left, and B, I would love to hear from the floor. So hand up from Shadi.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I'm sorry. I don't know if I, okay, sorry about this. I don't know if I can actually turn on my video here. Hello, I see some familiar faces here, John. Hello, and Marc, I know you're connected on LinkedIn. If I may actually comment on a couple of things. First of all, thank you very much for this. This is so much needed, especially in pediatric health. Just give you a really quick background, is that we, about a year ago, we actually presented to the UK government a proposal that we had with Cambridge University on a major pediatric proposal. I cannot go into the details of it, but basically the response to us was, oh, everybody is doing this. But I think the issue here is that what we were proposing was really beyond the status quo. So my comment here is, and I said to the government minister, don't put all your baskets, or all your money or all your eggs into one basket. So for example, I hear a lot about pediatric cancer, and we have just started working on pediatric cancer, but we have been working on rare diseases for a long time. We have created a library of different molecules that are hugely applicable to rare diseases. The problem is that most investors and the government bodies and even the center that was just recently established, they're looking at all technologies. We already know adenoviruses, AAVs and lentiviruses, they have huge challenges in manufacturing, in safety, in immunogenicity, in toxicity, yet everybody wants to do this. So to us was, you should be more looking towards the future and what is really available out there. And the other thing is that disruptive technologies come all the time. Ours is a disruptive technology, yet the funders, and I had a conversation with the head of a health funding group, and he said, oh, if there's no profit here, we don't want to fund that. The issue is really some of the comments you made here is that many times the funders, the VCs, they have a herd mentality. I sat in a meeting at a major meeting, and they told me, if you're not doing anything with an antibody drug conjugate, we're not funding you. So those of us who work on pediatric health, those of us who work on rare diseases, ultra rare diseases and rare disease in children, those of us who work in oncology in children, we do understand some of the statistics, we do know the need. The problem is that the governments, the funding bodies, they do not understand, and the VCs have a herd mentality. Just a last comment, David, thank you very much for that introduction. The statistics you showed, we actually had the similar one when we were showing it to the government. And yet, I think there's a missing understanding, a huge missed opportunity here to fund more pediatric research. Thank you very much.
You're preaching to the converted, but that I think is our challenge, is that we continue to we need to spread this to more and more. But thank you very much for those comments. If is there anybody else that would like to ask a question? If not, then I think we've got a couple of minutes, and I've got a closing question for our panel. Okay, if not, then oh, hi.
Hi, can I ask a quick question? Hi, my name is Lynn Tanner. I'm actually a pediatric cancer rehabilitation researcher and a startup founder. And what I find is interesting is that, while my research has shown that PT reduces nerve damage related to cancer treatment, right? So that is my specialty space. My product, which is now FDA listed, actually, when you sell it to hospitals, is for a rehab department, right? So it treats a multitude of diagnoses, anyone with a physical disability or a speech impediment, or, right? And so when I'm talking to investors, what I'm finding difficult is that my reputation and my research, and I mean, we're writing grants on using the device in pediatric cancer, yet the product market fit, what hospitals wanted, is for a rehab department. So when I'm talking to different investors, I find myself, how do I how do I approach this message? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's focused, yet my customers are more broad. But to understand the message, I feel like I'm being told, no, focus on pediatric cancer. And as you guys are talking, you know, that is obviously an interest. So I'm asking, I guess, what approach do I take for funding, or both, not put all your eggs in one basket, I guess.
Anybody want to take that one?
I was going to suggest that Kerstin do, because she's a venture builder and she's doing a lot of these things. But I think it is a tough problem, Lynn, because you're building something around an area where you've got some good data with cancer, presumably. You've got good data, you've got experience. Investors are interested, but the product market fit here, there's something askew. So what's happening there? And I don't know that there's an easy answer. Either the product needs to be repositioned, or you need to figure out how to change your model and convince other people that it's the right way to do it, and maybe including convincing yourself if the highest value for that product is going down a different, in particular, sales path, and really finding the market fit. Doesn't mean you can't come back to it, but your board, all this, you want to develop a solution that is the best business model going forward, that's going to create the highest level of success, because you owe that to shareholders and all of those things. When you're a company, it is sometimes at odds with the mission you set out on. There's no easy answer to that. You do need to make some hard choices with it. You can go either way. I do sometimes, look, I've had this situation, and it's a more extreme example of companies I invested because of they're in the pediatric space, or because of their pediatric program. We've made 25 investments or something. 2 of them have pivoted away from pediatrics, which drives me up the wall. But it's the right business decision, or at least for one of them, it was definitely the right business decision. And that does at some level have to come first when you have shareholders. If you don't have any shareholders, you can still do whatever you want. But once you have shareholders, you really have to make sure that that fiduciary responsibility to them is still there. So no easy answers on that, but yeah, this is life, and how what you have to figure out.
Charlotte, I know that we're at the end of our time. Have we got a couple more, have the panelists got a couple more minutes just to close quickly?
Sure.
So first of all, Lynn, thank you for that question. I think we hear it all the time, is what I would say, in terms of kind of where it is. And there's, as John said, no easy answer, but I'm sure if you want to continue that, we'll be happy to take that up with you. I just wanted to close. So first of all, thank you for everyone that's joining, and especially to the panelists. And I guess, given the time constraints, I'm going to ask you just to do this as succinctly as possible. But what are the 3 things that each of you would look for when you're evaluating an opportunity? 3 words to do that. Kerstin, you mind if I could ask you first?
Yeah. For me, one of the biggest factors is the team. And not just whether they have the expertise in the relevant area, but how entrepreneurial are they, and can they move something from the idea into something that's actually real? Then obviously the idea needs to stack up, and often people in therapeutics development say, oh, this compares to such and such, which is currently on the market, but they totally ignore what's in the pipeline, and there's bigger and better things in the pipeline. So I usually look at that. And what's the third thing? Yeah, the technology must be exciting, obviously.
Thank you. Marc?
Well, the team, for us, the human and how this group is gonna build the company, and how it's gonna develop the culture inside the company, for us is super important. Okay, and probably one thing that we measure and we take special is this project unique in a way that it's been intentionally built for children, or it's something that it could be done in adults first and then move to children. So how unique is for instance, we don't like projects where it's a drug that has been used in adults and then repurposing the drugs for children. No, this is for us, it could work, it's super important, but it is not our focus. So the idea to develop things for children first and then to adults, it's one very important criteria for us.
Brilliant, thanks, Marc. And finally, John.
Yeah, so team. That's repeated. I'll add an element to team, which includes governance. I value good teams, but that includes having strong boards from as early as you can possibly do it, and having that governance that makes you look like a professional company, not an R&D project. Which ties in a couple of things, but the math, I want to know that the company's really thought through what the investment prospects look like, or the funding prospects through this whole journey, and what does that math look like? Can you create a compelling story that's going to attract money? One of the things that scares me as an investor is something that's working, but you only get halfway because the money's not there, and you're not going to be able to attract it because you're not offering a strong enough value proposition. And then sort of the journey. So that sort of goes with math, but the journey, thinking everything through. If you're, if you build and it's a therapeutic, you build this whole thing, and all of a sudden but you can't figure out manufacturing or whatever it is, and that was always there, somebody should have thought of that really early on. If you're a device or digital or whatever, you need to think about selling well before you're even looking at you've got an FDA approval or anything. Can you sell this? How are you going to sell it? Who's going to buy it? How long is the sales cycle? These are really important things. So thinking about the entire journey is really important to me. So what I left out is the clinical need there. I take that as just a given. I'm not even going to look at, I'm not having the conversation if the clinical need isn't there. So I didn't highlight that.
So thank you. I'll throw in health economics again, just so we've got that at the forefront of everyone's mind as well. But really appreciate, John, Kerstin, Marc, thank you so much for joining us. I feel like we've literally scratched the surface of the potential opportunity. So if anyone here or anyone listening wants to get in touch and talk a little bit more about those opportunities, then I'm sure that we're all open to taking those calls. So Charlotte, thank you for inviting us, and I'll hand back to you.
Yes, well, thank you to all of you, John, Marc, and Kerstin, and particularly David for moderating this great panel. I feel it has been really insightful, and thank you for all these valuable lessons that you bring to the table. And thank you for being part of this 1% of venture capital in pediatrics as well. So without extending more, you can find this record. You will find this recording tomorrow, so you can share it with everyone that could be interested in this topic. I think it's really important to share it. And also, you mentioned the report as introduction, and we will soon have a white paper on this pediatric innovation in Europe, where we will have a focus in the funding part. So we will also extend on many points that you mentioned.
Perfect.
So that being said, happy Christmas to all, and hope we see each other soon.
Thanks.
Happy Christmas.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas, everyone. Bye.
Bye.